boy. It's too hard to the ice out the neck. It's too hard to the ice out the neck.
Yo. How we doing? What's up, everybody? Hello, everybody. There we go. How y'all doing on this fine Tuesday? This is Ethan. I'm your host. Welcome to Texas Sports World. If you haven't already, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. I messed up the whole order of that, but here we go. I'm going to get into kind of why I think there's one person in this Rockets team and offseason that could really propel us to the next level. And it's kind of a little bit of a turnaround from what I've been, talking about in previous videos. But nonetheless, I think after sitting on it, I think that this one person and this one move could really take us to the next level. If you couldn't tell by the thumbnail, or if you didn't read the title, I'm talking about the addition of Kevin Durant. Now, I understand that he is 37 years old. I get it. All right. I understand that you don't want to bring in somebody that screws up the timeline and the development of your younger players, that you spent so much time and so much effort and losing and not only getting, these young players, but also developing them, that if you ship them out or bring somebody in of Kevin Durant's caliber, are you kind of making all that work not worth it? I would argue now at this point, no. Now here's why. I think that because of the team is young everywhere outside of Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks. And I'll get to Dillon Brooks in a little bit. But really outside of, and Jeff Green, but who are we really talking about at that point? So really outside of those three guys, this is a pretty young roster. Then you got Steven Adams and Jock Landale, but both of those guys Jock didn't play, and Steven Adams only really played in the postseason. So, at this point, you have so many young guys that if you were to, and the deal that I'm proposing, you aren't even really getting into your core young guys. Obviously, you would love to keep all of them, but ultimately, I think, a guy like Tari Eason, he has a lot of value elsewhere. I don't think he has a lot of value here right now. I think, Jabari Smith, I think he's got a lot of value here right now, and I would like to keep him. And because of that, I think you could maybe talk about a Dillon Brooks deal. And that's what I said that I was going to get into later. I think that you could get into a discussion with, Dillon Brooks, and, you already know that the Suns are going to want their first round picks back, right? Okay. So you give them their first round picks back. You don't got, plus, obviously the 10th pick this year. So you give them that. You still have your picks. You still have picks. I believe you still have picks from the Brooklyn deal. I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong because I think I saw. But anyways, point being is you're not giving up all your draft capital. That's the main point. Whether you have the Brooklyn picks or not, you're not giving up all your draft. You're not giving up all your draft capital. So you still have that. So that means even if this Kevin Durant thing doesn't pan out the way we want it to, you still have draft capital later on to either draft a guy or use those picks to go and get somebody if you really want to. If the Amen Thompson, Jabari, Cam Whitmore, if those guys are, and Reed Shepherd, if those guys are pan out the way they're supposed to, with the way we hope they are, then ultimately I think moving a Dillon Brooks wouldn't hurt as much, and also it'd probably make the money easier. It'd probably make the money in getting Kevin Durant a little bit easier. So I'm thinking, I'm thinking a deal with Dillon Brooks, Tari Eason, maybe a Cam Whitmore, because you're gonna have to give I'm just thinking if you really wanted to sweeten the pot, and then the 10th pick and then 2 first-round picks. Now, even as somebody is advocating for this, that might even be a little steep for me, because now I have a personal affinity and personal love for Cam Whitmore. I think he gives me Carmelo Anthony vibes. I think he can shoot the ball from anywhere on the court. I think he's a really good offensive player. Maybe his defense is why he hasn't really played that much. And as we all know, Ime's strategy and Ime's core is his defense. And so maybe and also with if you bring in a Kevin Durant, because like here's the thing, I had this discussion with my Uncle Shane earlier today. I would give up a little bit on the defensive end for 10 to 12 points more a game than Kevin Durant. And that's not and Kevin Durant's not even a whole I mean, he's obviously like he's not like Kawhi or, an all-world defender, but he's still a pro basketball player, like he's not some scrub. He's still probably top 4 small forward, top 3 small forward in the league, you know. And then okay, and then we can talk about this. Okay, so let's say so now you're at that point you got Fred at the 1, Jalen at the 2. Now this is where it kind of gets interesting for me. I talked to Monko Shane again about what if we moved Durant to the 4 and then you had Amin at the 3, because I think Amin is he's an athlete. He can do a little bit. He's not a shooter, so you're not forcing him to play on the perimeter, so he's going to be down there anyways getting rebounds. So why not have him down there getting rebounds? And because he showed that he can rebound over, he can box out, he can do over that with the best of them, and he's only going to get better. He's only going to get bigger. He's only going to get stronger. So I think that having an Amin slide in at the 3, so now you got, two really you got a really good when he's on offensive player in Jalen Green. You've got because Jalen Green, when he figures it out, he's gonna be a 25, 26, 27 a game player. He just for whatever reason just hasn't clicked for him yet, and I'm not sure we should be so quick to did y'all hear that? Here you go, Bob. Go. I'm not so sure at this point we should be so quick to kind of get off of them, if you will. Let's see. I think I had some bookmarks again. So okay. So this is I was thinking about this before I saw this tweet, but then I saw this tweet and I was like, yeah, this is exactly, and it's funny that I saw this because this is exactly what I was talking about. And so, that's basically the same exact lineup and situation that I was talking about, which is, the more I think about it, I didn't post this, but it literally took the words right out of my mouth. And I woke up this morning and I texted Isaac and I think I might have texted Shane and Logan, and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, give me KD. Okay. Give me somebody that I know is going to go up there and give me 27 a night. Somebody that's going to command respect. Somebody that's, maybe 27 a night's okay, fine. 24, 25 a night consistently. And then Fred, we get a little bit more out of Fred. Maybe he gives us 16, 17 rather than the 14, and then, Jalen, he's a little bit more consistent. Alfred Şengün now getting more consistent, because let me tell you, Jabari Smith is not a 5. Okay, he's not a 5, and trading for Giannis would probably mean that Jabari starts at the 5, because you're probably going to have Şengün involved in that trade. So that to me, that's the Şengün at the having to deal Şengün, Jabari at the 5, and then having Giannis, who's not a guy that's out there just setting screens. He's a point forward. He's not like a guy he's not a pick and roll dude. That's not his game. So it doesn't seem that all of that kind of personally keeps me out of the Giannis sweepstakes. If I'm that doesn't move me as much as a Kevin Durant when you get to keep Şengün, and Jabari, because in this one you're talking about Cam and Dillon and a future first. That's personally, if there's one player on this roster that's kind of, because we don't, and Michael Shea made a good point earlier when he was talking to me. We don't, the Rockets aren't in a position. We don't really need a villain anymore. I think Dillon Brooks came in, he served his purpose. He gave the young guys a little bit of fire. He showed them that, like, you can have a little bit of nastiness to you. He's not afraid to back down from nobody. I think he instilled that. I think he was a very good, I think he instilled he's one of the cogs in this defensive team for the Rockets, and so I think that ultimately he's a guy that maybe he has served his purpose here. And you bring in a guy now that everybody on the team is maybe up to par with Dillon Brooks as a defender. Everybody's kind of a pretty good defender at that point. Then maybe adding an offensive guy that can kind of push us on to the next level on that side of the court. This is a totally different Rockets team. And I think that's kind of my personal opinion on why I think, a Kevin Durant deal seems more likely and seems like it would fit the timeline for the Rockets, because I don't know if adding a yacht now there's another deal I was looking at that I've seen was kind of being talked about on Rockets Twitter about and I had brought up a Lauri Markkanen deal. What about Lauri Markkanen? And because I think he kind of adds in the rebounding, that you don't want to lose a rebounder, you don't want to lose defensive what's the word, rotation, if you will. You don't want but you want to gain offensive ability and shooting, right? Lauri Markkanen might be the perfect guy for that role. I'm not saying he's a great defender. I'm not saying, but I'm saying he can fit the role, and he can do that though. He can rebound and he can defend in that role. But he also he can definitely shoot. And so then, how would you go about that? Because, he sat out at the end of the Jazz sat him towards the end of the year because, word is they wanted a better draft spot. And, he did have some lingering injuries here and there. So maybe it was just best for all parties involved for him to kind of like sit the rest of the year. I think he played in 47 games or something like that. And here, I'll pull that up right now. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. This one. So shout out to this guy for doing this, and whoever pulled a screenshot, I appreciate it. But in this one, it's kind of hard for y'all to see on the screen, so I'll so you got Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Jock Landale, Cam Whitmore, the first and second this year, and a first in 2028. And then we get back Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, a 2029 second and a 2030 second. I don't hate that. Now, I will say that it seems like adding Jalen Green to that just seems like an overpay at that point, in my opinion. I understand that, but I still think that Dillon Brooks holds some value. I'm not saying Dillon Brooks is bad. I'm not saying he's I'm just saying I think he's filled his role here. That's all I'm saying. I think he's filled his role in Houston, and I think adding a shooter and Lauri Markkanen, but now ultimately maybe the swap of Colin Sexton and Jalen Green, maybe, but at that point I think you're losing a little bit on the offensive side of things. Now let me see. I want to know. I admit it. Let me see. I want to know. Am I still sharing my screen? Let me stop sharing my screen before I look like an idiot. I want to know what Colin Sexton did this year statistically. All right. Okay, so we're talking about an 18. Let's see. Shot 40% from three. I would that would 26 years old. It's literally just maybe you jump. They talk about timeline. This would be perfect actually, because they talk about timeline and they talk about the front office doesn't want to add a whole bunch of add a dude or add somebody that's going to, like I've gone over before. So when they talk about this timeline, maybe you bring in a guy like Colin Sexton who, is, let's see. And then Jalen Green, I think he's like 22 or something? 23. So you're talking about 3 years. You're not really moving the timeline. He's still mid-20s. You're not moving the timeline up so much that it'll ruin the development of everything else. Colin Sexton still has a little bit of development to go. There's no telling. I mean, right now he's at 18, and then Jalen was at 21. So, a little bit of a different there, a little bit, but Colin Sexton shot almost 6% better, at the behind the 3-point line. Jalen Green was at 35, and then let's look. I want to know. So Lauri Markkanen's a little different because, like I said, he only played in about 47 games. But you're talking he probably didn't shoot that as well as he is used to. Now, admittedly, throughout his career, he's about the highest he's ever shot was 40.2. So, but he's not he's a down low play. I mean that's good to me. I'll take that. Now let me see what in comparison to a Dillon Brooks. Huh. Okay, so, you know, Dillon Brooks shot about 40% from 3 as well. Um, and that's not bad. I'll take that from Dillon Brooks, but only about 14 points a game. So wasn't as much as a high level at a high clip as I would like. He wasn't scoring as much as I would like. So I think if you traded not traded literally, but exchange like replaced Dillon Brooks with Lauri Markkanen, Jalen Green with Colin Sexton, then maybe you still have that defensive edge with the offensive scoring that you would lose at the guard. You'd have at the forward, and then Şengün comes. Şengün could be so like you got spacing at that point. It seems like so that's something I'd be interested in. I kind of just talked myself into it. But I think maybe if I would still kind of need. I don't know. It just seems it's now. Granted, we're not giving up as much. Now that with this deal, we would have no picks in this year's draft, which would kind of definitely suck. But you'd still have Reed. And he's still coming up. He'll probably get a lot more playing time this next year. You still got Fred. You still got your main guys. Now giving up Jalen Green would kind of be like he was like the first, like the inaugural, like from our first tank, you know what I mean? So like it would suck. And I think he's got a lot of talent left. I think he's got a lot of growing he could do as a player that would ultimately give him to that level he wants to be at. But right now, I just don't think he's there. And I think the Rockets are in a position where we need to be there. We need to ultimately we're in a position where we're trying to go win a finals. We were the number 2 seed and lost to a 7 seed. That ain't good enough. Now, obviously, there's a lot of it. We've talked about it all. You could still stay with these guys, let them grow. Somebody I got mentioned to me earlier today. We could do the exact same thing Oklahoma City did. If we just now, my argument to that is Oklahoma City got SGA. We ain't got us an SGA right now. So. If Jalen Green was performing at a SGA level, then maybe, but he ain't, and we're talking about trading him. So I think ultimately Dillon Brooks, maybe time for him to, move on. I think a Lauri Markkanen deal with Colin Sexton in it. If you could, keep your core guys, I think that would work. A Kevin Durant deal would really work as well. Just please not Giannis. That's all. At this point, I think I've talked myself out of Giannis. I think I've thought about it long enough. I don't think Giannis is kind of where I would like to be. I think that's all I have right now regarding Dillon Brooks, Rockets, and stuff right now. Me and Isaac are gonna hop on later, do another video. Probably won't be a Rockets centric. Might be. Haven't really decided yet. We're going to try to get into some other stuff too. So if you've gotten this far in, I appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Let me know what you thought. And also, I'm always welcoming guests. So if you see this and would like to come hang out, let me know. I love to hear debate sports. We're here to have fun, have a good time, crack some jokes. So yeah, if you liked what you saw, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you later. See.
I ain't with that beefing on the net. Tell me what's next. Tell me what's next.